Hey guys, this is our third and final part of our interview with Brian from Let's Build That App. Now, what we discussed in this video was a bit about education, him from a traditional education, my kind of gripes with it, and being a self-taught developer. We also talk about the technical interview process for a lot of developers, and I give kind of my viewpoint on it. He gives his as a senior developer who would be interviewing these people and going along with the process. And so it's a pretty good interview. It's a little bit longer than the other two, but I really enjoyed this one, and I hope you guys like it. Thank you for watching. Enjoy. It's so the cool thing about YouTube and what I really like about it is I really do think that given. This is very strange because I've been going back and forth about going back and finishing out my degree, but I really do think given like 15, 20 years that the sort of not YouTube itself, essentially video platform and courses made by everyday sort of people will probably be the primary way people educate themselves. It's not the only way, but in terms of what people have resources to do. And YouTube is very interesting in that because if there's anything you want to do, there is a video on YouTube to teach you how to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like as the old traditional school system is super outdated if you think about how advanced technology is nowadays. I mean, the biggest problem with schools for me is that when you're there sitting in that very uncomfortable seat in the classroom, you really don't want to be there. That's the biggest problem for me, at least. Like, why don't I just go home, sit in my big comfy chair and just load up a browser and have a cup of coffee and learn that way? So
for me, it's more of the format. I've never enjoyed the Let's. I always felt like college was a memorization test more than a learning process, and that for me was it. I have a lot of issues with how much it costs and stuff like that. But in terms of being a student, the reason I didn't necessarily like it and thrive was I felt like a lot of times I was just it was a task of how much can I actually remember verbatim and rather than actually understand it. And I hated that.
Yeah, I kind of hated school myself. Like I hated college.
Just very interesting because you went to a very prestigious school. So I find that I just assume that if you go to a very prestigious school that you innately probably liked your school experience.
Yeah, it's like I found myself just not liking my professors. Like 95% of my professors I just did not like. And I had the same problem where the things that I was learning in each one of these classes, it didn't really like apply to me. Well, I might be I might be an outlier or an exception because I had already known that I wanted to be a programmer ever since like I was 16 or 17. I'd already known. So I kind of felt like, why am I going to school? It's kind of a waste of time. Just let me get out there and code already instead of learning this stuff. So
yeah. It's interesting though, because I kind of have the same sentiment about 95% of professors kind of like I don't like you shouldn't be 95% of professors probably shouldn't be professors. Like you have a 5% of really good professors, then you're like, those are the ones that stand out. But of the 20 or 30 or 40 professors you have, there's probably 5 in the best case scenario where you're like, those are people I would like to follow and connect with. The other ones, you're just like, look, man, I get you're phoning it in, you're collecting a paycheck. At least that was my experience. Or like maybe you're a little too out of touch with how to teach. I don't know. I had a very negative experience, but that's just my 2 cents, I guess.
No, that's kind of how it is. If the requirement to teach at a college was to start a YouTube channel and teach for 2 years on YouTube, and then see what you're doing wrong, then that would make the entire like school system just so much better. Like they would weed out the people that can find out that they're not good teachers.
it's also very interesting, the concept of tenure, of essentially not being able to be fired if you're shitty at your job after a few years. Yeah, what does that exist in any other job? If I start being shit at my job, I should be able to get fired. I don't get it. So that in itself inspires a sense of content that you know what, I'm untouchable and I can be here. And I mean, I don't know about your experience, but I definitely had those teachers who really just, let's fail 90% of the class because there's nothing I'm doing wrong. So it's kind of a strange thing where, like, you could have this. That'd be great though. The YouTube filtering process or some sort of vote filtering process. We'd have no teachers though. That'd be the problem.
Well, I don't know if that's a huge problem. I mean, the school system is kind of, I don't know. I guess I'll leave this school topic alone for now.
Yeah, but this is something I could talk about for hours, and I'll just come. I try not to, because I think naturally, being someone who dropped out, people are just going to think you're bitter, and I'm really not. But I try to look at it objective and talk about my experience. But I definitely understand that it will come off as bitter.
Yeah, no, I mean, I took a year off from school myself because of how much I hated it. So taking that 1 year off helped me kind of reevaluate things that I had already known for a long time. And I was like, okay, I got to go back and get my degree. Otherwise, it would have been just a waste of everything, all my time. But yeah, there's one thing about UC Berkeley is that those professors that are there, they are actually not there to teach. They're there for like their own interests, which is the research that they're going to do at that university. And so they're more in it for research than teaching at all. That's why maybe I'm throwing all of those professors under the bus, but yeah, teaching is not their priority.
No, that's fair. I mean, even at the Cal State level, all the teachers I had were there as a part-time job because they were just trying to collect a check on the, you know, that's why we had so many crazy weird hours classes on Saturdays and Sundays, and you know, class starts at 7 p.m. and shit like that. And so you have all these weird hours because they're all part-timers who are just trying to get a check and literally just, this is the assignment that the teacher before me gave me. And then the other ones that were sometimes good were previous students that they just wanted to get them to pay for their masters. And so that was like 90% of the, and then you have 10% of professors who are caked in, and about half of those are just really bitter and just upset and they don't care. And then you got 5% of the good ones, you know?
Yeah. 5% is probably higher than I would estimate. I think for me, my experience is that the TAs, the teacher assistants, were the only people that kind of gave a shit about the students at all.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate, and part of the reason that I went to school is not necessarily to get education, was to get a job. And so, like, sometimes people have a different, like, people think they're one and the same, and they're not really. And I always thought, like, I had to go and, you know, get a degree, and it makes things easier. But for me, it didn't end up being the case, and I ended up being much more successful once I dropped out of school. And so it's kind of it's a strange thing. It's just,
I was watching your video about it, like your thought process and going back to school, and I found it to be a little maybe it might be, I don't really want to influence your decision, but
no, I encourage you to.
It almost feels as if you've already found your way in, but for some reason it feels like you want to go back a few steps. But I understand that because sometimes you just don't feel like you know everything that you should know. That's why you don't want to go back.
Well, no. So this is the thing, is I don't think I'm going to learn shit when I go back. I really don't. And so it's really for the piece of paper. That is it. And kind of to I guess I don't even think it's to prove it to myself, but I started something, and it would take me about 18 months to finish at this point. I've done the research, I've reached out to schools and figure out, okay, I do it online. It's taken me 18 months. But there's something about it's more something to fall back onto, because as we've talked all this about teachers, this is something I actually have thought about doing maybe 10 years down the road, of actually going and trying to be a good teacher, and not necessarily change the system, but it's something I've learned about YouTube is that I like teaching. I like doing code and helping the younger developers that I work with. So that is one of the influence decisions. But for me, in terms of going back and actually learning, I don't think I'm going to learn anything. I really don't.
Well, yeah. I mean, so I didn't graduate with a computer science degree. I graduated with an applied mathematics degree, and I took a lot of computer science courses while I was at university. And sometimes I do want to go back to school to take some of those computer science courses, but I just feel like, I'm not being paid to go back to school, and I'm paying them for my tuition. It doesn't make any sense for me financially anymore.
That's also something I've thought about. Is it would cost me about $15,000, and I'm like thinking to myself, maybe I can get somebody else to pay for this. I mean, it's not something that you can do necessarily when you're trying to get your first job, but you're establishing yourself at a company. Maybe they will pay for it. So it's interesting. And if I wasn't necessarily having interviews and having recruiters reaching out to me and having in-person interviews and technical interviews and being able to have conversations with people who will give me jobs and seeing that it really isn't an issue to them, I would probably be more hard set on going back. But I am still very torn, because it's almost like it's ingrained in me of, since I was a child, I was always told this is the path you must take. You must study hard in high school. When you get done with high school, you must go to college and you must graduate the degree. And if you don't, you'll be homeless and a crackhead. And so this is there's something very ingrained into me that's still very worried about something like that, even though it's probably an unrealistic fear at this time.
I feel like you've already seen through that facade.
I have, but I feel there's still something that is just and it's almost like I'm just so worried about going back that I'm worried about falling back that I'm just going to go back. So I could see if we were really to look into it, maybe I'm going to do it by choice instead of life circumstances. But it's definitely a part of my life I didn't enjoy, and so the apprehension is not something of potentially going back to that place is not something I look forward to, and probably the biggest thing as to why I haven't yet fully committed to it one way or the other.
Yeah.
So on this topic of education, now that we're diving into it, what are your thoughts about all these now degree programs or certificate programs popping up?
So I really do encourage non-traditional schools. If you can find a way to get into software development, get into the industry through some kind of boot camp nanodegree thing, I do recommend it. I've been approached by Udacity to do I don't know, I guess their nano degree, help them out with their iOS curriculum. And I think it's a good idea. I think what they're doing is good. Might be a little bit more expensive, but you should be able to get some useful knowledge out of it, and it's probably relatively cheap compared to the traditional university fees.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a cheaper alternative. I feel like maybe one of the things that a lot of people get at traditional is you kind of get that you've not bought your way in, but you've worked your way in to, your resume sort of standing out compared to the people who haven't. And so you kind of have to weigh the pros and cons. It's I can spend 4 years and X amount of dollars, but you can also do a lot on your own in 4 years with X amount of dollars and kind of stand out as well. And I feel like the non-traditional route, as long as you understand that, you can succeed with it.
The biggest advantage to going to traditional school, traditional university, is the way that they teach you how to tackle algorithms, that is kind of like non-existent in boot camps and honor degrees, I would assume. And that's the major problem, because when you're being interviewed for jobs as a junior developer, those guys, they went through that whole gauntlet of the university system. So the way that they're going to test you is that same way. So if you don't have that background, that preparation, you're kind of at a disadvantage, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, it's the algorithm stuff and like the, you know, let's sort this. Okay, well, I did this. Well, I actually wanted you to sort it in this way.
Yeah.
Shit, let me Google that real quick.
And like, what is this efficiency of this algorithm? Big data. Yeah. What is log whatever? It's like, who cares? No one ever does this anymore.
Hey, it's a very interesting thing, because I've had those. Let me just solve. And I talked recently about how I knew I was going to be looking for a new job, and I'll probably put this interview out after I get this job. but about 2 months ago, I spent 6 weeks doing algorithms on a site called CodeFights, and did about 98 of them, and just every single day, every day for about 6 weeks. And then they actually interviewed me on CodeFights for potentially recruiting me, and they have, you know, great connections with you know, major companies. So I was very excited about it, and then I tanked the algorithm interview after working on it for 6 weeks. So it's something I feel like even if you are prepared for, sometimes you crack under the pressure, but there is the more technical algorithms where you have to know the terminology. Like I found myself really, even being up till the, you know, the end of my junior year, going on their site, having to review all the very computer science terminology that goes along with, okay, well, we want you to solve this in end notations. And I'm like, what? All right, let me see what they're talking about here.
Yeah, the computer science side of things is, it's something that you cannot escape, unfortunately, and they're always going to grill you on that because there's nothing else these people can ask you, really. Most of the time it's like, oh, do this problem, give me the efficiency of it, and if you get this right, then you should be able to get the job.
So I had a very good yesterday I had a very good technical interview. So I went in, they had me solve, just whiteboard a simple algorithm that they said, basically it was like a Fizzbuzz sort of thing. You know, is this modulo 3, modulo 5, or both, return it. And then they, just to make sure that, okay, you know, we talked to this guy, we want to work with him, and they, basic algorithm on the whiteboard, people get stressed out. I know I do. I crack under that, and I just start sweating real bad. But they then set me and said, okay, here, you're going to be doing front-end development. We're going to give you 1 day to build a basic application. This is the basic app. This is the API we want you to use. And I found that to be probably, even though it was in terms of time, it took me about 3-4 hours. In terms of time, it was a longer commitment. But in terms of a nice interview process that would actually prove that I could do the tasks, very, very good. And I don't know if maybe that was because it was a front-end development and there's more of a UI. But how are the technical interviews when it comes to iOS? Is it just that algorithm path?
So for me, I would typically give that simple version of that exercise where, okay, let's do a for loop of some kind just to make sure you understand what a for loop is. And then after you pass that, it gets into the, oh, you build me an app that has a list of things, and it has to go out to the internet, read some JSON, parse it, and then do things like asynchronously so the UI doesn't lag and doesn't hang. And then just based on that, you can inspect their coding style and see the things that they're doing wrong and the things that they can improve upon. And you can really tell just by looking at their code where they're at in their iOS career. So that's typically what I will give for like a, you know, somewhat junior to mid-level candidate.
Now, was there now I don't know this, but I assume that it varies at every company. But in terms of, you've been a senior developer for a while, and did you, as a senior developer, when sort of going company to company, do they still test senior developers in detail most of the time in your experience? Like when is this shit gonna stop for me? I guess is the question I'm really trying to answer. Is it never? I hope it's not never. I might just have to be doing YouTube. I'm sick of this shit.
I don't know. It's not that horrible. I find it's kind of like the initiation process, right? You get into the frat, and then you like when you're up in the top, you kind of enjoy grilling other people about it. And although it's a painful process while you're going through it, it's kind of like one of those necessary evils.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard statistics that I've seen about like something like 70% of senior developers can't do the Fizzbuzz problem, and something like that is unacceptable. So if that's actually true, those are the people who are fucking it up for the rest of us to take these tests.
Well, yeah, I mean, everyone that's writing code should at least be able to solve the Fizzbuzz question, and that should be at least one of those gating interview ones. And as you kind of climb the ranks as a developer, you don't get those questions as much anymore. You get more like architectural questions, like if you have this factory that's pumping out cars and you want to make your classes so that you can pump out different types of cars, what kind of pattern would you use? Like what types of interfaces would you write? And would you have an abstract class of some kind? You would have those types of questions because that's more of a senior, how would you architect this problem? And then you would maybe get some questions like, how would you design your database so that you can access it from multiple services in the cloud? Things like that. Not so much, in the weeds, how would you write out this algorithm?
Nice. Now, it's funny that you bring up like the architecture stuff, because I found when just even being on the junior level, just because contract roles, they were asking these architecture questions because you're a contract employee. They're not necessarily going to groom you as much as they would a junior developer that they're trying to essentially, because companies are really trying to hold on to the developers that are for roles because everyone's jumping around. And when I was being tested, I did get more architecture questions, exactly like scenarios you were talking about. How would you, what would the database look like? What would, how would you break out these models and things like that?
Yeah, we typically ask those questions because we want to know if you've been exposed to these concepts before. Even as junior developers, it's a tough first couple of months if you've never been exposed to MVC. Like, as a senior developer, I would hate to ramp up a guy that has never ever seen those concepts before. So having two candidates, one that knows it and one that doesn't, I would probably hire the guy that knows it.
Yeah, I wish I had a better solution for how to hire developers. And the sad thing is like, I don't think even the ones that people are using are great. And I don't have a better option, so I can't really complain too much. But it's one of those things where I don't know how your process was, but I had about 4 in-person interviews, if I remember correctly, before I landed my current role. But I don't know. I've talked to a few subscribers, and like they make like I feel like that's pretty bad at in person because they want to hire you. You're just not good enough a lot of times once you get there. And then I've had subscribers tell me they're going 10 or 12 deep, and they're trying to make me feel better. They could be lying though. They could be lying. I don't know.
Yeah. I think my success rate is about 1 in 4, 1 in 5. And once I get in the door, it's like, okay, I'll just get this question right. Most of the time, they don't even ask me like algorithm questions. It's like most of the interviews that I've been on have been somewhat easy, I would say. Like they're just personality fit questions. And having a strong portfolio is more what they want to see. That's how I fought that battle.
Yeah. it's been my experience on the junior level that portfolio is important, but even more so, just being somebody who codes. And like that's literally it, is you want to be somebody who codes and is passionate about it. And that is like something that I know that they like about specifically me. And I try to emphasize this to people who are trying to be junior developers is if you really don't like this stuff, you really should find something else to do. But if you do like it, it's okay to show that you like it and show that you're eager. And obviously you have to have the skills, but that's really what a lot of companies that are looking to take on perm junior developers, they want that person who is going to enjoy it and enjoy their job.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because I didn't understand that until like 3 to 5 years into my software development career. Like, you really have to show you're willing to code things that are totally random and not related to your job at all, because that goes a long way in impressing people. Like, what does this guy know and what is he willing to learn on his own?
Yeah, and it's I mean I know for me personally it's been all the world and the difference, and it's YouTube has been a big I relate YouTube to getting basically my last 2 jobs. Like, granted, a lot of hard work went into it in other areas, but it is a big portion. And part of it is just showing that is this guy just coming in for a check, or is this somebody who we can say, hey, we're going to switch you from this to this and we want you to learn it, and you're like, hell yeah. Now, is that from a senior developer standpoint, how important is that when you're interviewing candidates or when you were interviewing candidates?
I guess in terms of their eagerness to learn new technologies, it's always very easy to spot someone that's like super into it and gung-ho about, let's use Angular 4 or 5 or whatever, right? Like, you can always tell someone's like, I'm super excited about TypeScript. I'm like, who's ever excited about TypeScript?
I am. I like TypeScript.
Right, and then you stumble upon these little diamonds in the rough. You're like, oh yeah, we totally use this guy. He's into these obscure technologies. Well, I guess TypeScript might not be too obscure these days. But yeah, the more someone is able to show that they're capable of learning a new technology, which there's always this extreme steep learning curve with new technologies, right? You know your stuff with C# or JavaScript. You know it already, and it's always hard to like even convince yourself that you need to learn something new. And for someone that is able to show that off, I think it's definitely bonus points.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate your time and thank you so much. And can you tell everyone one more time where they can find you?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. If you want to look for my channel, it's on youtube.com/LetsBuildThatApp. And then on Twitter, it's @BuildThatApp. That's my handle. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn, you can search for my name, Brian Voon. I'm pretty sure we'll have it in the link notes. Yeah.
All right, perfect. Thank you again, man. Have a nice night. Good day. Thanks. I guess you're like 3 hours before me. Have a good day.
Still gotta pump out these videos, man.
I know. I'm with you on that. That's about what I'm about to do myself. So thank you again. Bye. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. If you happen to be looking for a boot camp, I couldn't recommend Dev Mountain any higher. They also include housing with their tuition, so you can get up and go and get started right away. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.